speaker of today's lecture needs no introduction, though I am trying to introduce him before you because I think all of you must have heard his name. He is Dr. Amit Bhattacharya. He is professor and head Department of English in the University of Gaurbanga. Actually, about the sir, he is a man maker and continuously shaping the minds of the students with various innovative thoughts and ideas. And apart from it, he was awarded with Shiksha Ratna by the government of West Bengal in 2019, and he is still continuing with the innovating job of teaching in various ways, in various techniques to the students. And I hope today's lecture would be a very influential for my students as well as for others who will be here to listen. Sir's valuable speech. And now I am asking Amit sir just to begin the lecture, and I will accept the participants when they will send me request. Okay, sir. Now it's to you. Please proceed the lecture, sir.
Very good morning to all of you. Let me at the outset thank the college and my own student and now junior colleague Bashpar Sarkar for giving me the opportunity to speak on a very interesting and a favorite book of mine, Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre. Now, Jane Eyre, is one of the key texts of Victorian England. A novel that was, in its own turn, influenced by many and led to many adaptations. Jane Eyre still has her legacy. Charlotte Bronte, even though she has written many other novels, she is mainly known for Jane Eyre. We all know that. Charlotte Bronte, as we all know, was born in 1816 and died quite young in 1855. So her literary work is basically, it coincides with the reign of Victoria. Now, so far as my lecture is concerned, I am really trying to reread Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre. And while reading Jane Eyre, I am actually trying to foreground the role played by three important factors: gender, desire, and empire. Now, at the very outset, I must invoke the authority of Jane Eyre to justify my choice. Jane Eyre, at one point in this text, tells Mr. Rochester, don't expect or exact anything celestial of me, because you are not going to get it. Now, slightly modifying this, may I now say that since the target audience of this lecture is basically undergraduate students, so please don't expect or exact anything very erudite from me, because you are not going to get it. Why am I calling my lecture a rereading needs to be pointed out for the benefit of my target audience. What is rereading? I read a text, I try to understand the message, I try to understand the technical details, the historical background, and so on and so forth. Then where comes this idea of rereading? My dear friends, as you can very easily understand, rereading means reading again. Why is rereading important? Because Every reading is some kind of an interpretation. We all know that when A and B reads the same text, oftentimes it so happens that A and B come up with different interpretations, different readings. They highlight different nuances, different aspects of the text. Why? It is basically a result of their own tastes, their own background, both educational and social. And it is also a reflection of their own life experience. So often we read things into a text, and at every subsequent reading after the first reading, especially of a foreign language text, we tend to find out or highlight certain aspects of the text that we may not have properly found out at the first reading. So, by calling my lecture a rereading, I am trying to point out that there is, number one, no definitive reading that can be privileged over other readings. Number two, that every subsequent reading can help us in understanding the text more, in gaining familiarity with the text and its context. That is why my lecture can never take the place of your own reading. What I can do is to point out certain aspects that can whet your appetite for further inquiry. And that is what I propose to do. Jane Eyre, we all know, is about a self-reliant, educated, orphan girl whose life, as reflected in this text, took place, we are supposed to know or guess, sometime, this is important, sometime in the first half of the 19th century. So obviously, the notions governing the story, the character of Jane, her expectations, their fulfillment or frustration, all these things were greatly influenced by the time and place that Jane inhabited, the type of person Jane was. And here I must make you understand this, at least try to make you understand that Jane's identity and our expectations, the expectations of the reader, both during the Victorian age, because this novel was published in 1847, and even today in 2020, when we are, thanks to Bhaskar, trying to reread this text, there are certain expectations that readers, critics, and categorizers must have of the text and of the author, of the character and her behavior, her conduct. Jane Eyre, we all know, is both formed and framed by certain things. For example, she describes herself as POPL, an acronym. You know, it's a mnemonic device I used to use during my student days. Jane Eyre calls herself poor, obscure, plain, and little. Now look at this, poor. So obviously the class identity is pointed out. Obscure, the social identity is pointed out. And then plain and little. These are physical attributes. So, being a Victorian woman, Jane Eyre can only expect of society or life at large things that are dictated by her own subject positions. Her gender, she is a woman, a Victorian woman at that, a Victorian English woman at that, a Victorian woman who is an orphan as well. So, poor from the indigent stratum of the society, and then there are, contrary to social expectations, certain desires that motivate Jane's actions. And those desires, not only of Jane, but all of other characters who are there in this particular book, these desires also influence the drift of the story, the growth of the character, and also the ultimate resolution of the plot. At the same time, my dear friends, you will be required to understand that this was a book which was which was published in 1847 during the Victorian age, when rampant colonialism marked the history and social dynamics of England, the English. Empire was already not only a myth, a reality. British Empire was a reality, and day by day the British Empire was growing. We all know that England, a very small country compared to, say, someone like India, some country like India or China, actually had a worldwide empire, and both commercial and imperial influence. So, I am trying to point out how these facts of Britain's imperial presence influenced the drift of the story. Apparently, I have already shared some materials with your teacher, and I have told him to circulate them amongst you. So, at least you must know the brief outline of the story. Jane Eyre is an orphan who has to depend on others. The generosity of very cold aunt, her very cold aunt, Mrs. Reed. Ultimately, she is sent to a charitable institution, Lord's Institution. There, he is a student for some time, teaches for some time, then she goes to Thornfield Hall and Manor to be the governess of Eyre. Ultimately falls in love with her employer, Mr. Rochester, has to withstand heartbreak when it is discovered that the romantic engagement between Jane and her employer cannot culminate in marriage, because Rochester is already married to a mad woman in the attic, as your Sandra Gilbert and Susan Hoover will tell you. Bertha Mason is already a wife living. So obviously, the bigamous marriage between Jane and Mr. Rochester is illegal. So then, Jane, even though she loves Rochester, very much, even though she is quite unconventional in harboring as well as expressing her desire. She leaves Rochester, is befriended by a family of brothers, a brother and two sisters, who ultimately turn out to be her cousins, gets an inheritance, becomes an heiress, shares her inheritance with her cousins, ultimately goes back to hall, comes to know that already Bertha Mason, the problematic first wife of Mr. Rochester, is dead. So she is free to pursue her relationship with Mr. Rochester, but there is a catch. Mr. Rochester is now made and has become blind. So ultimately, as an independent woman, this is important because Jane Eyre started life as a dependent orphan. Now, she can marry Rochester, the man whom she loved, as an independent woman. This is not going to be a matrimony marriage like Charlotte Lucas's marriage in Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. But how is this inheritance bequeathed to Jane Eyre? Where from does it come? What sustains the wealthy living of these characters like Rochester, even to some extent of Jane herself? Ultimately, we will come to know from the text that it is wealth gained from the empire, from the colonies, that is tainted by its association with slavery, with subjugation of certain peoples, and exploitation of natural and human resources in those countries, in those colonies, that ultimately sustains the life and luxury of these British actors. And these are things that we must understand, even though apparently the plot of the novel, at least towards the end, seems greatly manipulated by the author's desire to provide a happy ending for her readers. We have to understand that the marriage between Jane Eyre and Mr. Rochester is brought out not so much by the virtue and passion of Jane Eyre, just as it is in, say, Richardson's family. Here, the question of money has a great role to play in enabling Jane and Rochester to marry and live happily ever. So these are things that we are going to discuss through this lecture of mine. See, so far as gender is concerned and its influence on the text is concerned, you have to understand that the main character, the eponymous heroine of this text, is a woman, conditioned by the gender roles and gender expectations that cling to the Victorian woman. I am using the present tense because it is the domain of representation that we are concerned with. So, The gender roles, as Judith Butler has taught us, gender is not only a social and cultural construct. Actually, it is all about gender performativity. The roles that you perform, gender is something to be performed. The essential gender identity is often to be regarded as a below. So, there are certain things that are expected of a woman, especially in the Victorian age. There are certain things that a woman, especially during the Victorian age, expects of life. Let us take up not only the case of Jane, but because this is a novel with many characters, let us take up certain other characters for analysis. For example, Jane's low-good friend, Helen Barnes, who dies young because of consumption. Helen Barnes is a typical Victorian woman who, despite her many intellectual accomplishments, has to suffer like a martyr at the hands of life, at the hands of other characters. But, for example, you see, even though she has the answers to all questions, her memory, her capacity to understand and retain information as well as explanations in her mind is infinite. She is held up for ridicule and even censor, physical punishment by her teacher like Miss Scatchett. Helen Barnes, as a typical Victorian woman, and here the sex and gender is united, has to endure the assertions of others about her, even if those assertions are dishonest and erroneous. Similarly, the overt religiosity of Helen Barnes is also conditioned by her gender because she is too young and too ordinary to be in a relationship with a man. Because in the case of the Victorian woman, she had to endure men, poverty, and other misfortunes, oftentimes. So, because Helen Barnes is too young and too ordinary to be in a relationship, she can transfer her love and dependence to God. She says, I love him and I think he also loves me. Now, contrary to what the immature Jane or some of the contemporary readers may have thought, Helen Barnes is a shrewd woman. She knows that her lack of wealth and social contact, her own disorganized habits will mean that she will have to endure much suffering in later life. So by dying young, she hopes to escape much trouble and misery. And ultimately, she resigns herself to her fate. Now, this resignation is something that is conditioned by her gender. But not every individual reacts to the situation in the same way. For example, the passionate, self-reliant, and resilient Jane Eyre does not agree to go down without a fight. She has the desire to be loved, to be accepted for what she is. She has the desire to experience life in all its fecundity. She has the desire to be a woman, to love and be loved, to have passion and have it reciprocated by someone like a Mr. Rochester. At the same time, we will have to understand how gender and desire get connected at a plane that is at once socio-cultural and economic. The desire of the characters, because desire does not only mean sexual urge. Desire can also mean the wish to have something or to have something to happen the way he or she likes. Desire can also mean an expressed wish for something or someone that goes beyond a sexual craving or lust. So we'll see how desire is itself gendered in the case of this particular Victorian novel, as it is in the case of other works of art. And in all cases, we will see that empire, the fact that Britain has colonies and can bring both slaves and wealth from such colonies and such savage countries that they can civilize, that they can exploit, that they can convert to Christianity, and that they can manipulate to serve their own interests. You will see that here in this particular text, empire exerts its influence on the text in terms of three locates and in terms of three events. One is the West Indies and Rochester's connection to that place because of Bertha Mason. Bertha Mason, who is Bertha Mason? The now mad wife of Mr. Rochester, who was a West Indian heiress to a West Indian fortune, being the daughter of a West Indian planter. Even though a Creole woman, she is reasonably white, but not white. That is why she is often vilified, dehumanized. And when this dehumanization, this neglect, this deracination, this displacement from the sunny West Indies to the somber English shores leaves her, decides herself, she is confined to Thornfield Hall, to a third-story room as a man. Then there is also reference to India and the evangelizing mission of St. John's Rivers to that place. And last but not least, there is mention to Madeira. You know, it was a temporary colony of England during the Napoleonic Wars, and it had got very serious colonial associations to slavery, to wine, to ill-gotten wealth. By squeezing out the lifeblood of the population, wealth was wrung. and wealth was brought to England to sustain the excesses of the English upper class, and also to sponsor the social climbing of someone like Jesus. Now, Susan Mayers has pointed out the road of the empire in no uncertain terms. We have to understand that the empire actually here operates not only as a site for the domination of other people by the English, it also metaphorizes the ultimate subjection of the hitherto spirited Jane Eyre to the patriarchal authorities of a marriage and the comparative dwindling into insignificance as the wife of Mr. Rochester. Here, we have to understand that we must read this text in the context of the social, legal, economic, political, historical, and intellectual background that this book reflects. We all know that at that time, during which the story of the text takes place, the plot is set in. At that time, the Married Women's Property Act of 1882 was not thought of. So obviously, if Jane had inherited the legacy of her uncle John Eyre after her marriage with or even engagement to Mr. Rochester, she could not have divided or shared her fortune with her cousins. So she becomes a famous soul. She becomes a provider. She becomes an independent woman who can do whatever she chooses to do with her own will. Giving independence, a state that she herself had desired, to her own cousins. Okay, so yes, Jane Eyre also understands one thing. When she divides her legacy, her inheritance with her cousins, and leaves for herself only 1/4 of the fortune, £5,000 to be precise. She does not feel it incumbent upon her to point this out to her husband. She only says that her uncle had left £5,000 for her. So here she thinks and acts for herself, which was something not very common for the Victorian woman at that time. She has already given £15,000 to her 3 cousins, righting the wrong committed by her uncle, who happened to be the uncle of the reverse husband. In this way, she at least temporarily prefers kinship bond to a selfish marriage for the time being. She even decides to make strangers whom she has already discovered to be her cousins, her lifelong friends, by giving them competence to lead life in their own terms. So this is what Jane Eyre can do. So we can very easily understand that it is Jane Eyre's gender, it is Jane Eyre's desires, and the desire of other characters who have to interact with her, with whom she has interpersonal relationships, like Mrs. Reed, like Miss Fairfax, like the reverse. And it is also the existence of the empire and the wealth in terms of money and the human cargo of slaves that ultimately determines not only the drift of the plot, but also the way Jane Eyre matures as an individual. My dear friends, this is a very interesting text with layers of significance. And you may be thinking in your own mind why I am choosing to talk on these three aspects of the text in this way, ignoring certain other aspects like anger, like passion, like betrayal, which are also very major themes. So far as the literary existence of the text is concerned, Charlotte Bronte's not to be doubted date to her predecessors, the writers of the Gothic, writers such as Richardson and Jane Austen, and how Jane Eyre as a key Victorian text has unleashed the creative fancy of many subsequent writers who have tried to critique Jane Eyre's treatment of the subject of the empire and gender from their own subject positions and ideological leanings. People like your Jean Rice, who in The White Sargasso Sea has revised and reworked this particular text in a hypertextual manner. We may also think about, because we are discussing this text with a batch of undergraduate students in the main. You may do well to watch Bengali movies like Har Manahar or Joy Jayanti to see how the framed story of a governess and her love for her socially superior, economically superior employer and the various ups and downs thereof ultimately culminates at the touch of the magic wand of necessity and authorial intention to a happy marriage and the promise of a happy life ever. These are things that we are not going to discuss in detail here. But, my dear friends, I think here I must sign off, leaving the heft of the discussion to you and your cooperation, your participation. You have to ask questions that can lay bare certain hidden aspects of the text. So I must end here by referring to the epitaph of Helen Barks that Jane Eyre arranges to be written on the grave of this much loved childhood friend. The word is reserved, that in Latin refers to something when translated into English, which will mean I will rise again. So the idea of resurrection resurgence. And I must end here by pointing out that possibility. I will discuss this again somewhere, sometime, maybe not here and now, but obviously somewhere and sometime, when other rereadings will take place, when other aspects of the text will be brought to life. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for such engaging lecture. And now I ask my students and each of the participants if they have any questions regarding today's lecture, then they can ask directly to the sir, and even they have any problem, then they can ask freely in Bengali. কেউ চাইলে বাংলাতেও জিজ্ঞেস করতে পারো, কোনো প্রবলেম নেই। হ্যাঁ, যার যা প্রশ্ন আছে অবশ্যই জিজ্ঞেস করে ফেলো। স্যার, একটা অনন্যা মিশ্রা বেনারস হিন্দু ইউনিভার্সিটি থেকে একটা চ্যাট বক্সে লিখেছেন, ক্যান ইউ এনলাইটেন আস ওয়ান্স মোর অ্যাবাউট ম্যারেজ অ্যাক্ট?
আমি কথাটা ঠিক পরিষ্কারভাবে শুনতে পেলাম না।
আচ্ছা, ওই অনন্যা মিশ্র বেনারস হিন্দু ইউনিভার্সিটি থেকে একজন, উনি চ্যাট বক্সে পোস্ট করেছেন একটা কোয়েশ্চেন, ক্যান ইউ এনলাইটেন আস ওয়ান্স মোর অ্যাবাউট ম্যারেজ অ্যাক্ট?
No, actually I was not talking about the Marriage Act. I was talking about the Married Women's Property Act. This was brought in 1882, long after the publication of this text and the story of this text had taken place. Now, in the whole of the 18th century and in much of the 19th century as well, married British women could not own property separately. Even engaged women could not do anything or divide her property with anybody, because it would have been considered legally as a fraudulent loss caused to the intended husband. So here you have to understand the fact that Jane Eyre receives the property when her marriage to Mr. Rochester has been kept on hold. It has been cancelled for the time being. So she is not a married woman. She is not even an engaged woman. So she can do anything that she likes with her property. That is the thing I was trying to point out, because we all know that the economic case, the case of independence, the case of sustenance, survival, all these things were very, very important for women. Because look, one thing is here. You see, both Jane Eyre, the character, and Charlotte Bronte, the writer, they have worked as governesses or teachers. That means they were working women. Now, this fact was not so common in those days as it is now. So obviously the question, and that is why I was referring to Charlotte Lucas, a character in Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. You see, women had, in many ways, when they were not economically independent, they had to seek sustenance and economic security, financial security through marriage. This is something that in the case of Jane Eyre is circumvented. And that is why, even though at one time she was a poor orphan, dependent on the generosity of others, she ultimately turns out to be the provider. Because Mr. Rochester's estate has been burnt down. He has lost his vision. So when Jane Eyre marries him, she brings with her the money that will sustain them both. And she marries Rochester not because of any mercenary motive, because of love. As an independent woman who could provide for them both, that means both Rochester and Hurston, and also provide competences to her own cousins. That is St. John Rivers, Mary Rivers, and Diana Rivers. Okay, any other question, please?
I am again repeating, if anyone have questions, they can ask the sir directly, or if they feel comfortable in asking in Bengali, then they are free to ask the questions in Bengali.
Okay. Hello, sir.
Yes.
Sir, আমি সঞ্জীব বলছি, আপনারই স্টুডেন্ট স্যার, গৌড়বঙ্গ ইউনিভার্সিটি।
Please come to the question, my dear.
স্যার আমি ওই টেক্সটটা একবার পড়েছিলাম, সেখানে একটা লাইন আছে যেটা রিডার আই ম্যারিড হিম। স্যার এই লাইনটা নিয়ে যদি একটু এক্সপ্লেন করেন। রিডার আই ম্যারিড হিম, এরকম একটা লাইন আছে টেক্সটটাতে, আমি একবার অনেকদিন আগে পড়েছি, যদি এখন রিসেন্টলি পড়া হয়নি। স্যার এটা নিয়ে যদি একটু আলোচনা করেন, যে আমরা কোন কোন অ্যাঙ্গেল থেকে এই লাইনটাকে ব্যাখ্যা করতে পারি।
Bhaskar, I am not getting the question.
Sanjeev, please, you can write the line in the chat box. Okay, sir, he's writing the line in the chat box. After that, I am reading out to you.
Any other question? In the meantime, please ask any other question, and I will get the question from Bhaskar through chat box.
If you want, then you can write in the chat box. There is no problem with it. Yes, sir. Actually, Sanjeev Dev Sharma was referring to a line, reader, I married him. Actually, this was line quoted from this novel. So, he wants you to explain the line. The line was, okay. Reader, I married him.
I married or buried?
Married, sir. Reader, I married him.
Okay, you see, ultimately, who marries whom? In this text, I am asking you the question, who marries whom? It is basically, you see, when you talk about in a relationship, when you talk about the active party and the passive party, usually in the patriarchal setup, it is the male who is the active partner and it is the female who is the passive partner. In heterosexual unions, in most cases, it is the male who is the active partner. It is the male who marries and the female who is married. In this context, in this text, ultimately, it is Jane, as I was telling you, who marries Rochester, who has already lost one arm that has been amputated, and lost his vision as well. And he has also lost his estate. So ultimately, it is Jane who marries, who takes the decision. Are you getting my point? It is she.
হ্যাঁ স্যার
Yes. Yes.
There is another question that was posted in the chat box. And do you think that the desire of Rochester's wife and Jane collide with each other? How can it be described?
So I'm trying to get it straight. Are you actually is the person asking about the desire of Bertha Mason and that of Jane Eyre?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So you see, there are certain parallels between Bertha Mason and Jane Eyre. If you have read the text, you will see at the beginning of the text, there is a reference to Jane being put in the red room and kept there under lock and key, confined to the red room. An angry Jane, a youthful, passionate, rebellious Jane, being confined to a room. And there are very clear-cut parallels between this Jane and the mad woman in the attic. Later on. See, in both cases, the object of desire is Mr. Rochester. And the desire is felt by, on the one hand, a Creole woman who has been brought from the sunny West Indies to the somber England, who has been neglected to such an extent that she has lost her mind. And on the other hand, there is Jane, who is a British woman, reasonably submissive and reasonably of poor standing to excite both the lively interest of and even the condescending solicitation of Mr. Rochester. In both cases, passion and desire is felt by both the women. But one's passion is reciprocated and another's passion in terms of her sexuality is scoffed at. During one of his conversations with Jane, Mr. Rochester refers to the sexuality of Bertha Mason in very lurid terms. This is another part of the dehumanizing project. Okay. Any other question, please?
I am asking for the final time. If you have any question, feel free to ask. Feel free to ask in whatever language, either in Bengali or in English. It does not matter.
No, I am telling you, বাংলায় কেউ প্রশ্ন করলে বিশেষ করে ছাত্রছাত্রীরা আমরা কিন্তু খুশিই হব।
One question is posted in the chat box, sir. Sir, please explain the imagery in brief in this novel. Imagery is in this.
It is a very vast topic, So I am going to give you certain hints. I can't discuss the entire use of imagery because it will be too long. Another discussion at least. Now, you see, on the one hand, what is an image? In literature, image is basically a device that works through the principle of approximation. You know, it is a pen picture, as we have heard from our student days. It is a pen picture. It is not a picture. It is built up in terms of words and word clusters. But it helps you evoke a mental picture of something or someone, a particular condition, and so on and so forth. So you will see, on the one hand, there is the imagery of constraint, the constraint that was put on the Victorian women, that was put on the lower class, and also there is the imagery of abandon, gay abandon. You just think about the way Charlotte Bronte pictures or depicts low institution on the one hand, and even the inn at Millcote. You just think about it. You know that Jane goes to a room in the inn because she does not find anyone when she arrives from the coach at Millcote to go to Thornfield. She is kept waiting. She goes to a room. There is a pleasant fire burning. There is carpet. There is wallpaper and so on and so forth. The entire picture is one of comfort and coziness, and contrasts grimly with her abode at the low mood institution, both as student and as teacher. Similarly, you think about the way Thornfield Hall or Gateshead Hall, the abode of Mrs. Reed, these things are described. And you juxtapose these things, these places with a place like the Lowood Institute. You will see how the contrast is indicative of the social and economic realities that cling to these places. Now, similarly, you will see that there are elemental images. Elemental images. Fire, for example, plays a very, very significant part in this particular text. There is physical fire that threatens to kill Mr. Rochester at one time, Jane at another time, and ultimately that guts the Thornfield Hall and leads to two things: the fiery demise of the mad woman, quote unquote, and also the maiming of Mr. Rochester. But there is an iteration of the fire image that leads it almost to the heights of a leitmotif. You know, fire here is not only physical but also symbolic. The fire of passion, the fire of hunger, all these things are there. Similarly, you will see there are also sensory images, optical images, auditory, olfactory images, gustatory and tactile images. The touch of, say, Helen Barnes, when Helen Barnes is about to die, Jane Eyre goes to the crib, kisses her on the forehead and on the cheeks, and finds out that Helen Barnes's forehead and cheeks are all cold. And this is indicative of the approach of death. Similarly, the passionate fervor of someone like Jane or even Miss Temple is communicated through the warmth of their presence and their touch. And contrasts with the cold civility and utter indifference, and at an extreme, even the ruthless malignity of Mrs. Reed. You think about the olfactory, the auditory effects of the speech of a Bessie or Mr. Lloyd, that contrasts with the sounds made by the punctilious Mr. Brocklehurst or the cold Mrs. Reed. And you immediately contrast it to the sing-song of Adele on the one hand, and the kind considerateness of Mrs. Fairfax. Similarly, there are symbolic images. Thornfield Hall, for example, this operates as a symbolic image. You have to think about the Gothic associations also. And that is why I may refer you back to Northanger Abbey, for example, or the Castle of Otranto. So, the hall, gloomy, somber, vast, untenanted and silent, that conceals beneath this silence many screams. Because, for example, you think about it, Mrs. Fairfax, when she is asked by Jane about the possibility of ghosts being there in Thornfield Hall, Mrs. Fairfax says, I have never seen any. But there can be, because the Rochesters have not been very peaceful lot in their times. So how subtly the writer refers to an unsavory past of the Rochester clan. They may have been ruthless in their times. Many shrieks, screams, and cries may have been buried there, as comes to light in the unnerving, mirthless laughter that issues presumably out of graceful, but actually out of the throat of Barthelmess. So obviously, imagery in Jane Eyre operates on many levels, on many planes. Any other question, please?
Yes, sir. There are a few questions that have been posted in the chat box.
Yes.
The first one by Ananya Mishra. Does the marginalization of Bertha Mason refers to the body politics and superiority of Imperial British Empire over Caribbean islands? This was the first part of the question. And the second part is it a parody over the condition of women in post-colonial islands?
Okay, Bhaskar, please help me.
Okay, sir.
I will answer the parts separately. Okay,
Okay, sir.
I
Okay,
will
sir.
answer the questions part by part. Okay, so
Okay, sir.
the first part of the question, as I can understand, because the line is not very good. At least my audio is not very good. See, so far as I can understand, the first part of it refers to the subjugation or marginalization of the colonized by the British sense of national superiority. Is it the thing that is being asked?
More or less same, sir. So, again, I am repeating. Does the marginalization of Bertha Mason refers to the body politics and superiority of Imperial British Empire over the Caribbean islands?
Okay. So, Acha, let us, because this is for undergraduate students, let me be very, very specific. Number one, what is an empire? An empire has a mother country at the center and the colonies at the margins. Yes or no? This much is clear? Okay. So, if we are talking about the British Empire, England is at the center and places like the Caribbean islands are at the margins, and India and even to some extent Madeira, these are at the margins. So obviously, imperialism thrives on the creation of a binary of superiority and inferiority, of independence and dependence, of civilization and savagery. So who is considered to be civilized? The English. What is considered to be the center? England. Who is considered to be savage? The colonies and the colonized. Who have to be civilized? The colonized. So if they have to be civilized, obviously they are savages. They are less civilized. So obviously there is a superiority of the British, and these had to be maintained and even bolstered in order to justify the intellectual rationale for the imperial mission, the project. So obviously the superiority of the British race, British culture. Okay, why only about this thing? Your Bertha Mason. You think about Adele. She is half French. She is considered to be very exuberant and something of a nuisance. So she has to be brought to the cultural standard of the British. She has to be refitted, reorganized, and readjusted to fit in the British social setup. So why only the West Indian colonized? Even the French, they are considered to be something of lesser human beings. Their cultures are food. So during the whole of the Victorian period, this was very significant, and I would love to share some materials on this. The creation of the Britishness, as the defining standard, and other cultural heritages as subservient or inferior to the British. That is very much there. Okay, what about the second part of the question?
Is it a parody over the condition of women in colonial islands?
Is it a parody?
Over the condition of women in colonial islands.
But you said post-colonial beforehand?
No, sir, marginalization of Bartha, here it refers to marginalization of Bartha.
Okay. Colonial island. Okay, you see, one thing is there. If the colonized have to be dehumanized, you think about Caliban, you think about Friday, or you think about Barthelmess. So they have to be presented as number one, inferior, but at the same time dangerous. You think about Sycorax, the other. So representation here ultimately boils down to otherized. They are othered and otherized, to use a term from the vocabulary of your Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak maybe. So you see, in this context, you will see that in a way, the colonized, especially the colonized woman, the West Indian woman, is made fun of. Her physical appearance, her intellectual fiber, even her sexuality. All these things are made fun of, demonized, and made strange. This is very significant. And it can refer to some kind of a parody, but parody is a very loaded term. So I couldn't use that term here because it has got an accumulated baggage that cannot be just wished away. So it is a kind of a dehumanization. It is a kind of a scoffing at the colonized woman. That is there. That much I can concede. Okay, any other question, please?
Yes, sir. Another that was asked by Shatodipa Das. Sir, can we consider Rochester's Thornfield Hall as British Empire metaphorically, where he had been shackled Bertha Mason in the attic, if we metaphorize her as colony?
Now it is a very difficult question to answer because it cannot be actually treated as a microcosm of the British Empire. But yes, one thing is this: the Thornfield Hall, because it contains the spoils of the empire and the imperialist project, it is a locus that very much reflects and also profits from Britain's imperialist project. Why am I saying this? Because Bertha Mason cannot be called even metaphorically a colony. She has been taken from the colony to this place, to England, to Thornfield. But the threat of the colonized is neutralized by, number one, calling her mad, thereby depriving her of her human agency, and also by confining her to an attic and placing a guard, the guard of grace pool, and even dosing her liberally with port, with wine, intoxicating her. So she is dehumanized, she is rendered incapable of being heard by the outside world because she is mad. She has been termed, labeled as mad. Now, this is very significant. But by calling someone mad, you are actually depriving her of the human agency. Nobody is going to take her seriously. Even if she accuses Rochester of utter heartlessness, she will not be believed. So that is there. That is very much there. And there is also physical confinement. And she is intoxicated. She is rendered incapable of advertising her own loss and her own predicament. That much is there. Yes, go on. Any other question?
Yes, sir. Sir, in the text when Helen dies, Jane Eyre placed a marble tablet with a word resurgam, which means I shall rise again. Is this the rise of feminism? Or what does it signify? Is there any special significance?
You see, one thing is there. Resurgam, as I was referring to it, means I shall rise again. Now, in a way, this encapsulates the spirit of Helen Barnes, who lies buried and in that grave. Excuse me. Yes. But it is also the embodiment of a wish. The wish of a very much alive Jane Eyre, who wants the spirit of Helen Barnes to go on. So, on a metaphoric level, this can refer to or hint at the resilience and the undefeated, undaunted, the invincible power and spirit of woman. That much is there. But to call it feminist at one go will be, I think, a bit hasty. Because, two reasons are here. Number one, you have to keep everything within its proper context. Number two, so far as extratextual referencing is concerned, if you link it to the writer, you will see that regarding feminism, regarding women's rights, say, for example, women's right to vote, the suffragette movement, that has to come later. The opinion of Charlotte Bronte, the writer, and also Jane Eyre, the character, are ambivalent. You think about it. You see, even Jane Eyre, even though she is resilient, ultimately marries Mr. Rochester. Who? The same Rochester who, even though he professes undying love for her, did not hesitate to deceive her. She did not reveal the fact that he was already married. He did not reveal the fact that Bertha Mason was there, alive and kicking, or raving, as the case may be. So obviously, it can be the invincible power and spirit, or never say die spirit of women. But calling it feminist, I think, will be hasty. Okay, go on. Any other question?
Yes, this is a question, but I don't think that it can be answered. It's a very silly question. Sir, please say about Charlotte Bronte's famous novels and about Bronte sisters.
Okay, see, on one level, this can appear to be a question that has got no bearing on today's lecture. My dear friends, I will try to answer you because on another level, it has got some bearing on the text and the writer. You see, autobiographically, Jane Eyre reflects much of the ill-fated love that Charlotte Bronte had felt for Constantine Eyre. Similarly, autobiographically, this book was conditioned by the fact that Jane Eyre's writer, that is Charlotte Bronte, had worked as a teacher. Just as Jane Eyre works as a teacher under the alias Jane Elliot. You see, for example, if you read Agnes Grey, a novel by Anne Bronte, you will see that it has got a similar presentation, that the character is that of a governess. Now, if you actually link the passionate nature of Jane Eyre, you get parallels in a more exuberant and wilder Catherine Armstrong in Wuthering Heights. Even there are points of resemblance between your Mr. Rochester with a shady past and Heathcliff in Wuthering Heights with another shady past. And the passion, the larger than life presence, this also links Mr. Rochester to your Heathcliff. So one thing you have to understand, the kind of person Charlotte Bronte was, the kind of family and the siblings that she had, meaning Patrick Branwell Bronte, Emily Bronte, and Anne Bronte. Now, these had left indelible marks on the characterization and even the choice of plot by Charlotte Bronte in case of Jane Eyre. So I have, without saying it so, referred to the three most important and well-known novels of the three Bronte sisters: Wuthering Heights, Agnes Grey, and your Jane Eyre. There are other novels, but these three are considered to be very important. Okay, any other question, please?
No, sir. No, there are no questions.
Okay, so we may call it a day.
Sure, sir. Absolutely, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you. I again thank you for presenting such an insightful lecture, and I also thank each of the participants for being here. And after that, we shall call it a